Mikel Arteta is delusional. He's a fantasist. What he's saying isn't making any sense.
Who is it that you spoke to, sorry?
A few people of them. Yeah.
Oh, and they shared that opinion.
Yeah.
In terms
All
of
them.
events within the game.
Yeah.
And Arsenal as a club really do need to take these worrying signs seriously. Now look, before I go any further, I think it's important to acknowledge that I rate Mikel Arteta. I think he's a good manager with a very bright future, and I also think that any talk of replacing him is both premature and totally misplaced. He has restored Arsenal to being a serious competitive side. It's annoying for me, but Arsenal now compete at the highest level, and I think people are very quick to forget just where Arsenal were when he took over. The club were in disarray. The disparity between the fans, the players, the board, it was chaos. But he managed to align the club. He managed to win a trophy. He managed to get everyone singing off the same hymn sheet and inspire that team to be the best that they have been for at least a decade. When we talk about Arsenal's failings, it's important to not have recency bias. This time last year, Arsenal were the best team in the country. I know they didn't win the league, but they accrued a very impressive points tally, and they ran Pep Guardiola's Manchester City side, Pep Guardiola's treble-winning side, incredibly close. From the turn of the year, from the second that they returned from their winter sun in Dubai, they were a team inspired. Ben White became one of the best players in the league. As a defence, they were about as miserly as they would come, and as an attack, they really did have it going on. It felt like Trossard was scoring every week, Kai Havertz was doing a job, Martinelli was a threat, and Bukayo Saka, one of the best players in the world. Mikel Arteta drove Arsenal from obscure mediocrity, from nothing, to potentially 3 straight second-place finishes. He also drove them to their first appearance in a Champions League semi-final for 16 years and possibly their most impressive result in 2 decades. Beating Real Madrid home and away in the manner that they did is so significant. So it's important that we don't present where it's going wrong as anything more than what it is. But it is most certainly going wrong. Something is missing. And I actually believe, perhaps for the first time, that Mikel Arteta is culpable. And his recent comments are so worrying. Now, I'm not quite suggesting that it's on the cracking up scale. Do you remember when Manchester United fans, they were singing about Rafael Benitez, Rafa's cracking up, and it did seem to have an impact. And on some level, there was truth in the attack. This isn't that. It's more mild than that, but it's equally troubling. Mikel Arteta is totally delusional. Terribly sorry to interrupt your video, but will you do me a massive favour? Just click that subscriber button. I would love to welcome you into this community. Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to say something, and it is going to shock you, because it is totally factual, and it is the least controversial thing that you will ever hear on this channel. Arsenal were battered by PSG. That's it. Nobody disagrees. No Arsenal fan, regardless of how tribal or how biased, would have any argument if I were to say that over 2 legs, Arsenal were battered. They were well beaten. They were dispatched relatively easily by the might of Paris Saint-Germain. Nobody would contest that. Nobody with a brain would contest that. Nobody with 2 mince pies would contest that. I believe that even somebody as biased as the wonderful Ty from Arsenal Fan TV would concede that Arsenal were well beaten by Paris Saint-Germain. It's simply a fact. It's like saying Prince is the greatest artist to have ever lived. It's like saying Frank Lampard is the greatest midfielder to have ever walked the face of the earth. And it's like saying that the Kilburn High Road produces a wonderful person. Arsenal were battered by PSG. No one contests it. No one cares. In other news, water is wet. There is, however, one man who has an issue with such a statement. And worryingly for Arsenal fans, that man is Mikel Arteta. Now, his words around this topic really trouble me. They baffle me, and I feel that Arsenal fans should be slightly concerned by this too. When talking about the defeat to Paris Saint-Germain, they lost home and away, Mikel Arteta simply said that Donnarumma was the difference.
This game is about, and this competition about the boxes, and in both games, their man of the match was the same player, their goalkeeper.
Today was Ashraf Hakimi. Yeah.
Now, Donnarumma is a fantastic keeper. Donnarumma made some sensational saves, and on some level, he kept his team in the game. But to suggest that the Paris Saint-Germain goalkeeper was the only difference between the 2 teams is a wild misstep. Now, I'm not saying that Donnarumma wasn't sensational. You know, like Jan Sommer the night before, we've seen outstanding goalkeeping performances, but it's not necessarily the difference. You know, the save from Martinelli, that was so significant. The save from Martin Odegaard, it was unbelievable. And obviously that save from Bukayo Saka was right up there as well. Donnarumma played his part. But the difference, as if Donnarumma's performance was the only difference, absolutely not. In fact, this was put to Mikel Arteta, and he just insisted that Donnarumma was the man of the match, when in actual fact, Hakimi was. So, to say that Donnarumma was the difference, that's to say that everything else on the pitch was equal and Donnarumma was the difference. So the way I think that you can demonstrate this point is, you would say that if the goalkeepers swap teams, that the result would swap along with the goalkeeper. If the goalkeeper is the only defining feature of the winning team, if Donnarumma played for Arsenal, that would suggest that Arsenal would have won the tie. And that is completely incorrect. I would say that virtually every player on the pitch in a Paris Saint-Germain shirt won their individual duel. What Arsenal player triumphed over their direct opposition? And you can extend this courtesy to the managers. Did Mikel Arteta really get one over on Luis Enrique? Did Mikel Arteta cleverly try and outsmart Luis Enrique? Did he come up with some ingenuity, a new way of processing the game perhaps? Or did he give the ball to Thomas Partey and ask him to launch it into the box and hope for the best, optimistically? I saw Glenn Whelan on social media and it really did make me laugh. The comparisons between Arsenal playing in a Champions League semi-final in Paris and Stoke City and Tony Pulis. There is no way that you were going to outsmart and outwit a manager of the calibre of Luis Enrique by launching the ball into the box via a throw-in. Nobody, maybe with the exception of Bukayo Saka, maybe with the exception of Declan Rice, nobody won their individual duels. Saliba, shaky. Partey, shaky. Luis Skelly, shaky. Martinelli, shaky. Odegaard, shaky. And every single opponent that was in a Paris Saint-Germain shirt won the individual duel. So Donnarumma was most certainly not the only difference. He also said something rather curious before the game. When he was talking about Liverpool winning the Premier League, he said that Liverpool are going to win the Premier League title and accrue less points than his Arsenal team have accrued over the previous 2 seasons.
Liverpool has won the title with less points than we have in the last 2 seasons. With the points of the last 2 seasons, we have 2 Premier Leagues. So you have to be in the right moment, in the right place.
A pretty pointless statistic. A totally meaningless statistic. But most crucially, a completely incorrect statistic. Liverpool are on course to accrue 91 points, breaking the 90-point barrier this season. Arsenal have never done that before. So he's talking about the MVP, or whatever he called it, the MVP of both games being Donnarumma, being the only difference. He's talking about Liverpool winning the league with a points tally comparable to his team that finished second, which isn't quite true. And his entire persona looks flummoxed. He looks out of his depth. He looks like a rabbit in the headlights. And there is no doubt that he is completely in denial. The man is delusional. Just to put it in perspective, just so that everybody knows that we have covered this, Arsenal were well beaten. They lost by 2 clear goals. They lost at home. They lost away. And their form in the league has totally dropped, and their performances in the domestic cup competitions, pitiful. And do you know what else I would add to this? PSG won by 2 goals. They won at home, they won away. But I also felt like they had another gear to go. If Arsenal had mustered, if they had found some rhythm, if they had found an equaliser at home, if that goal that they scored straight after the half-time interval had stood, I still believe that Paris Saint-Germain had enough wherewithal, enough chutzpah, enough fight to go and get another goal. I feel like they won convincingly in 4th gear at best. And so we are where we are. Arsenal are going to end this season like they did last season, like they did the season before, trophyless. In fact, you're going back now 5 years, 2020, to the pandemic, when Arsenal won the FA Cup and there wasn't a soul in the ground to watch it. I think context here is key, isn't it? And let's use Manchester United, a behemoth club, in a similar way to Arsenal. Manchester United are a bigger club, but Arsenal are a huge Goliath club as well. Eric Ten Hag was their manager. Eric Ten Hag won more major trophies than Mikel Arteta in his shorter reign at Manchester United, in Manchester United's most turbulent era, certainly of my lifetime. Basically, it's going so wrong for Arteta. His players were crying in the dressing room, and he chose to tell us that. And it's getting to the stage now with Arsenal, with Arteta, that you can predict the collapse. You can set your watch by the collapse of Arsenal Football Club. You look at your watch, the second that you enter May, you know that they are going to flatter to deceive. And he was constantly talking about phases, wasn't he? He needs to get Arsenal into phase 5. Phase 5 was the land of milk and honey. It was the promised land. That's where you had to get to. You had to get to phase 5. At phase 5, that is when you compete for silverware regularly. That is when you compete for top tier honours. And ultimately, in phase 5 is when you win top accolades. What's happened? He has admitted that he believes his Arsenal team are in phase 5. If they're not in phase 5, they are touching phase 5. And the team have won nothing. At what point do people stop believing in his methods? At what point do his big players start asking serious questions about him? And most importantly, at what point do Arsenal fans start to have a genuine conversation about the future of Mikel Arteta? This time last year, Arsenal were in great form and they were ultimately undone by Bayern. That felt all right. It felt so different to this exit. That defeat by Bayern, you could explain it away and you felt like Arsenal were going to come up with the answer to that problem. They needed a striker. It was clear as day, clear for everyone to see. In the summer, they were going to put it right and they were going to go again the following season. The following season is this one. We were told that Arsenal were going to launch a serious and sustained bid to win major honours. And ultimately, this season, they haven't really done that. And they've actually regressed. You know, this constant talk about injuries. Havertz is injured. Jesus is injured. They aren't the bagsmen that Arsenal need. Mikel Arteta constantly speaks about games being decided in boxes. Champions Leagues being decided in boxes. And yet, for some reason, he hasn't solved his fox in the box issue. I think what Arsenal need now is so obvious. They need to make a big decision on Mikel Arteta. In my opinion, they should keep him. But if they choose to go a different way, Mikel Arteta cannot argue that he didn't have sufficient time. But the new sporting director, Andrea Berta, needs to get this right. And I believe he needs to go for the jugular. He needs to go into the transfer market and make that statement signing. Make the noise that Arsenal should make. When Arsenal went out and they signed Declan Rice, they signed a quality player, but they also made a statement. They signed one of the best players in his position in the world. And the way that they went about doing that, it was very simple. They spent the big bucks. They didn't take shortcuts. They went out and they bought a best-in-class midfielder that was going to elevate the options and elevate the belief around that dressing room. Arsenal, for them to be the club that their fans believe them to be, for them to be the club that their fans demand them to be, they need to go and do the same again, but up front. Now, I don't watch enough European football. I hear that Benjamin Sesko's the man. I hear that Victor Gyökeres is the man. I don't know. The man who I believe is the man is the Premier League proven man. And that man is Alexander Isak. But whoever Andrea Berta decides that man to be, whoever Mikel Arteta in council with Andrea Berta decide that man to be, they need to go and get him. And they need to go and get him irrespective of the price. Now, what I've just said there will raise a few eyebrows. Some of you will find that controversial, but it is completely and utterly correct. I say irrespective of price, and I mean irrespective of price. If Alexander Isak can be prized out of the clutches of Newcastle United for 150 million, Arsenal, quite simply, must find the money. Not only because of the player, but because of the statement, because of the noise. When you sign a player of that magnitude, everything changes. The entire belief around the club elevates. The standards elevate. Arsenal did this previously when they signed Dennis Bergkamp and players of that ilk. Manchester United did this previously when they signed a player like Eric Cantona. Chelsea did this previously when we signed maybe Ruud Gullit. When we signed Gianfranco Zola. You elevate the belief and the standards and everything changes. What they mustn't do is take a shortcut. No chat. For the furtherance of Arsenal Football Club, they must disregard any conversations around the likes of Ollie Watkins. He isn't that guy. But I tell you what could be horrific news for Arsenal Football Club and for Mikel Arteta. Tottenham's success in Europe. If Tottenham go to Bilbao and beat Manchester United somehow, and I pray to God that this doesn't happen, but if they do, that could paint Mikel Arteta's tenure in a terrible colour. I feel like Arsenal fans can be quite tolerant, quite relaxed, quite supportive of their manager. But I think that Tottenham's success before their own European success could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I feel like Arsenal fans can tolerate almost anything. But having their season pipped by one of the worst Tottenham teams of my lifetime, by a manager who isn't fit for purpose, would be terrible for Arteta. And it would test the temper of many an Arsenal fan. But when these things go wrong, Arteta needs to own it. And he needs to say the right thing. He can't simply say that they're the best team. It's delusion. He started talking about Arsenal deserving to be 3-0 up in the first 20 minutes in Paris Saint-Germain. And maybe that's true. But let's also then, if we want to talk about the chances that Arsenal missed or the performance of Donnarumma, let's talk about the chances that Paris Saint-Germain created. That chance where PSG hit the post, the chance where they went through on goal and Ramos hit the bar, the chance where De Gea dragged it wide, the chance where David Raya made a great save, the chance where it never quite came off because of the offside call. There are a million examples to prove that Paris Saint-Germain were the better team, primarily the fact that they won home and away, and on aggregate, they won by a 2-goal margin. Overall, I think Arteta's doing a decent job. Arsenal went 6 years out of the Champions League. They have now been in it back-to-back years. They've been in their first semi-final for 16 years. I see Arsenal's progression. I understand Mikel Arteta's point a bit. I think that the injuries played their part. But there is also an element of delusion from Mikel Arteta. And let's face it, his team were never really in the game against Paris Saint-Germain. But Arteta's team is really struggling to get over the line. And his record in semi-finals is atrocious. He's played 10 games as manager of Arsenal in a semi-final. He's won 1. 10% win rate. And some people are saying that Arsenal could have scored a lot of goals if they had a striker. And to that, I don't really know what to say. But maybe I'd ask, whose fault is it that they don't have a striker? Whose decision was it to spend the money on Mikel Merino? Whose decision was it to spend the money on Calafiori? Whose decision was it to believe that Kai Havertz could be the solution up front when certainly every Chelsea fan told you that wasn't the case? It's interesting, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. So if you have any strong thoughts on Mikel Arteta, on this sort of delusional streak that he is showing, I would love to hear what you have to say. So I'll be straight in the comments. So thank you all so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a like, please click subscribe, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say in the comment section below. Enjoy your day.